Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about Bretonnia in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. And oh boy, do they need a rework at the moment. I think Omens of Destruction has made it very clear what races need a rework and which ones don't. Bretonnia is certainly one of those races that does desperately need a rework. Creative Assembly has indicated that they're gonna do something. Hopefully it will be a full racial rework because, geez, do they need one in a lot of different ways. So looking at the unit roster, and this is where the problems come in. The first problem. See, Bretonnia has more unit roster issues than they have certain campaign issues, at least, in terms of things like economy, growth, etc. I mean, they have plenty of issues on the campaign, don't get me wrong, but it's really the unit roster that makes Bretonian campaigns pretty damn terrible, I gotta say. Because you look at the infantry range roster, they're not really good. The only good melee units to use, the only ones you want to use, are Battle Pilgrims and Foot Squires. That's it. And really, given the tier requirement of Foot Squires, you're probably going to be using Battle Pilgrims if you're going to use any kind of melee units whatsoever. The problem is the very low leadership that peasant units have, the infantry units. And the issue is, like, typically in a campaign, you want to get units en masse, but because of the peasant economy, you do end up in a situation where you can't even get a lot of armies of peasants. I mean, it's not going to be that much better with knights, at least early on, in a campaign. I mean, the issue is peasant economy combined with the quality of peasants creates a really bad dynamic. It does get solved in the longer term, but until you're dealing with that, it's just kind of not worth it. Even as chaff units, like, I'd rather recruit Skaven slaves than recruit Bretonnian men-at-arms. And that's saying a lot, because Skaven slaves are pretty damn terrible with regards to that. But yeah, in terms of infantry recruitment, I mean, the fact that men-at-arms with polearms that are a tier 3 unit is the most ridiculous bullshit in the world. Here's what I think should happen. I think these spearmen units, including the basic bow units, should be all available. And yes, the freaking peasant mob should be all available from tier 1 settlements. And then these guys should be tier 1, these guys should be tier 2, these guys should be tier 3 at most, really. That's kind of where I stand. Also, the fact that you recruit units from an economic building, I don't, but just a particular perspective on that. But as they currently stand, this is not a tier 4 unit. You know what the tier 4 unit is? Jeez, it's not even chosen with Khorne because those are a tier 3 unit. I mean, think of this. Chosen are a tier 3 unit. Wrathmongers are a tier 4 unit for Khorne. Chosen with grey weapons. Those kind of things. It just gives you a kind of idea of what we're talking about. Like, this is one of the problems. And even for, like, order races, take great swords against these guys, great swords win. Look at the greenskins, black orcs versus foot squires, all that. But you might say, oh, that's not the focus of the race. I don't care what the focus of the race is. The game plays in a certain way. And in that way, given the siege situation and the battle design situation, spamming a bunch of cavalry is not really a great way. But can get away with it better than most due to their flying cav units, so Royal Pegasus Knights, Royal Hippogriff Knights, and regular Pegasus Knights. But yeah, infantry is not great, ranged is not great, siege is pretty good actually, even though that's only 2 units, but then again, Vampire Coast only really have 2 proper siege units. There are quote-unquote more, but it's like, yeah, in terms of proper artillery units, it's like just 2, and no one complains about them having crappy siege. Field Trebuchets and Blessed Field Trebuchets are pretty good for what they are, in fact. If the rest of the Bretonnian roster were as good as the Trebuchets, let's just say Bretonnia would dominate the world. Because they might be inaccurate, but they do a lot of damage. And Blessed Field Trebuchets are freaking ridiculous as an artillery unit. So that's good. Skirmisher Cav, crappy. Regular cav on land, it's good, but the problem you run into again is like with the infantry higher tiers. Like questing knights are a tier 3 unit, knights are a tier 3 unit, but the things that you really want, like basically it takes a while to get to tier 3 in your campaign, kind of reaches the critical point at about that stage. You can rush for it. I certainly did over here in this campaign. You can certainly rush for it, but the fact that all the fun stuff is either tier 4 or tier 5 does kind of take the fun, does kind of kill the fun in a campaign. But that's assuming you can even afford recruiting those units. Beyond the tier requirements is the affordability aspect. Because of the vow system, and oh my, do I hate this fucking system in every way, shape, or form. Like, I would honestly see it completely removed, or at least remove what it does right now, because what it does is it makes it a nightmare to play any Bretonnian campaign from the perspective of actually recruiting armies. See, knights, Bretonnia doesn't use supply lines. So, in order to limit you, and this made sense for Warhammer 1 and 2, it does not make sense for Warhammer 3. Supply line changes, this is one of the reasons. So the peasant economy limits how many peasants you can have. The knight vows limit how many knights you can have, because realistically you can't afford to recruit multiple stacks of knights until you get all your vows unlocked. And this is where it kind of sucks, because let's consider this. So you get the knight's vow, which requires you to get, say, the easiest one, quote unquote, is to get 5 ranks. Okay, but the problem is you need to also do the questing vow to get the upkeep benefit for questing knights, and then the Grail vow for the higher tier units. Believe it or not, it's not the Grail vow that's the problem. Like, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you can even recruit those Grail Knights, those Royal Pegasus Knights, Royal Hippogriffs, all that, you're probably long on your campaign. That's not necessarily the issue. The issue, however, has to do with the questing vow and the knight's vow. So the fact that you have to recruit a lord. Suppose you're looking to recruit an army, right? Generally what you'll do is you recruit a secondary lord to recruit units. But the upkeep of even knights errant, the most basic knights, which by the way are not great cav, but the cost in terms of upkeep, unless you have this vow, will be ridiculous. So what Bretonnian players can do is, like, because of no supply lines, you recruit a bunch of lords, have them follow your main lord around, and try and get that vow done, and yeah. Or you just pay the cost in a campaign, or a combination of the both. The horrible one to unlock, however, is the questing vow, because you have a choice. Either fire a sea bell, which is not especially great, or win a siege battle in the desert or jungle climate. Why do you think Rapunzel has the much better campaign? Because she can always do this much, much better than anyone else. Do I have anyone else? Or yeah, defeat the legendary lord of ogre kingdoms, beastmen, greenskins, or dark elves. Yeah, I tried to do that over here with Grom, and the Fey Enchantress beat me to it. That's why I have that particular objective unlocked. So it is a really annoying system of vows, because you have to do it on every lord, and you have to keep in mind what levels all lords are, and if they finished all their vows, and then you have to do it for heroes. It's not really important necessarily for heroes. There are just some benefits, to be sure, like, you know, plus 20 growth in a province, cooldown to those spells. You can kind of live without that. I mean, obviously it's a significant benefit, but you can't live without the Lord vows, and that's gonna suck. But it is a lot of tedious fucking micromanagement, and I think, like, just the system itself just plainly sucks. Honestly, like, people have made this point, and I think I agree with them, that Bretonnia should have kind of like a WOM mechanic, and that should be how, like, the errant reward should work, and fuck the vow system, and it's like, just throw it down a deep dark well and ignore that it even exists. Simple as that. That would be my perspective. Like, just a regular, like, every lord you have should be a Grail Knight, right? That's effectively it. Funnily enough, in the lore, I think, like, Grail Knights, if I'm not mistaken, are unwilling to be led by anyone who isn't a Grail Knight. So just kind of worth pointing out. With regards to that. So yeah, the vow system is not good. It severely limits your campaign options early on when it matters. Elsewise, it's just a level of frustration and micromanagement that doesn't need to exist. And it's really annoying to unlock. Some of the vows depend on the campaign. It sucks especially for Lowen and the Fey Enchantress. Which brings me to the next point. Bretonnia itself is not exactly a great campaign area for Bretonnia. Now you might think, oh, Bretonnia has a bunch of higher tier units for recruitment, so you might think having a bunch of provincial capitals would be worth it. You would be wrong in that perspective. See, Bretonnia has a good economy. In fact, they have a ridiculously good economy. But it does require multiple buildings to get it done. Okay, that's not necessarily a problem. The issue is growth. But regardless, in order to make the Bretonian economy work, you do need to get, you say, a fields, then you need to build a windmill, then tier 2 farms and all that. So you have to use 2 building slots for that, and that's not even counting resource structures. It can be annoying, as I feel like the windmill should just, I don't know, be province-wide effect, even if it would stack, but just like allow us to get the fields to a higher level. It's annoying having to build a separate building. I could see the benefit in having it, but I wish it wasn't required. That would be my view on that. But here's the issue. Growth. See, when you have provinces with just 2 regions, it severely limits your growth. Doesn't matter which race you are. Now, Bretonnia has one of the highest, if not the highest, growth rates in the game. So you might think, oh, no problem, right? Yeah, but the problem is that while it gets up to 60 growth in a minor settlement, it's just not really going to be good enough. Like, consider this, right? Reichland has 4 provinces. Bretonnia, Corun has 2. This is generating 120 growth, right? This, well, at tier 3, you look at, that's also 120 growth at tier 3. But you can also get a bunch of growth buildings in every single settlement if you're playing the Empire. You can get more growth buildings, minor growth buildings, if you're playing an Imperial campaign. So, granted, Reichland is the exception rather than the rule. It's not as good in Nuln, but the point is, you end up suffering in growth, especially early on in your campaign. You do have a growth building, but it's kind of a crappy one, only 10, 20 growth in a settlement if you go for it, and yeah, your limited building slots are going to get even more limited. And that is one of the significant issues that you're going to have to deal with in a Bretonian campaign. So it's not really worth it, honestly. Like the way this, like I wish like the provinces of Bretonnia had more regions in them. Like if they each had 3 regions, if not 4 for say Corun, that would be substantially better in a campaign, because it would actually, given the tier requirements for Grail Knights, Pegasus Knights, all that, would actually make these units usable. But yeah, the tier requirements for recruiting stuff is just ridiculous. Tier 4 Foot Squires, Tier 4 Grail Knights, Tier 5 Trebuchets. Like, I mean, they're good as an artillery unit, but they're not a Tier 5 artillery unit. They're like a Tier 3 artillery unit at most. I mean, it is a ridiculously strong artillery unit, but Tier 5, that's insane. Like, Dreadquakes are Tier 5. These are not freaking Dreadquakes, suffice to say. I think that's a reasonable one. So, I don't really understand what CA's design philosophy was with all of this. Like, oh, let's lock really cool stuff behind very high tiers, so no one will ever freaking use it. By the way, this was the case in Warhammer too. You only use these units very late on in a campaign, if at all, because you always had the economic aspect to consider. Yeah, some of Warhammer Total War's design decision in terms of tier requirements all that were always questionable, because you would never use the really fun and interesting stuff. I'm glad they're moving away from that. Oh, but Doom stacking, look. Anyone who recruits a Doom stack in this game doesn't know how to play the game. Simple as that. Like, anyone who recruits a 19 Thunder Barges, why? Why would you do that, right? I mean, you might have more reason to recruit 19 fucking Hippogriff Knights, but not really. Like, even in a Bretonnia campaign, it's not really something you want to do in a campaign. Because it's better to have a bunch more armies for strategic flexibility on the campaign map, unless you're the kind of race which benefits from having fewer armies, and that's Khorne. You want to take a look at a Khorne army roster, what you recruit? Ain't freaking 19 Bloodthirsters, that's what I can tell you as much. It's a diverse army with artillery, infantry, and all that. That's why you want to recruit as Khorne, because it works better, because it allows you to counter different situations better. in that case. Though granted, it is certainly focused on mortal infantry units. But that's a different discussion. So yeah, the unit recruitment tiers are not great. Now, you can, and I emphasize the can aspect, you can make things much better from an infantry perspective or just an entire armor perspective with armory. But this is a tier 4 building. And by the time you can start massing these, quite a lot of these, it's like, GG, well played, your campaign's been over for 30 fucking turns. Like, seriously. This campaign is over. Like, I was watching someone who had never played Total War Warhammer play Warhammer 3 as Bretonnia, and he like, oh, he conquered this entire portion of the campaign, and he's like, done. He's not wrong, by the way. Like, yeah, the campaign is done once you've dealt with the situation over here and maybe Be'lakor, as I did. I just let the Norse guns keep that because couldn't be bothered. But that gives you an idea. You have economic issues because of the vows. You have army recruitment issues because of the vows and peasant economy and unit tiers. You have settlement growth issues because of the design of Bretonnia. Not because of the Bretonnian region design. Not Bretonnia as a race. See, this is where Rapunzel shines because she actually starts in areas with 3 freaking regions and thus can grow. While she may have a more limited start in certain ways, she does actually have a much better campaign overall. Now in this case though, she's getting wiped out by Warzak. Maybe I should play our campaign again. Have to deal with Warzak because I can tell you one thing. In every campaign I've played since Omens of Destruction came out, Warzak has dominated this entire freaking area every single campaign I've played. It is pretty damn crazy, I'm not gonna lie, especially that Rogue Idol tier 3 recruitment. Not sure how they do in Auto-Resolve though. Probably very well. I say I don't know because I rarely have to deal with them in a campaign or stacks of them. The final issue with Bretonnia, like beyond the vows, the recruitment options, the limitations on settlements, all that, you do have a climate issue. So yeah, your climate is not particularly great in a campaign. I think it's not really a Bretonnian, like I don't think Bretonnian campaign should be about like, oh, you took Bretonnia, great. Actually, you kind of don't want to deal with all of Bretonnia because, you know, Ekikla, and it's annoying to have to go over there. So, let's go after the squishier targets. Let's conquer the freaking Empire. Seriously, that's the best strategy in a Bretonnian campaign. There's this meme about, like, Leuenlingen conquering Marienburg. Let me tell you this, the AI does it because it's sensical. Marienburg is an easy faction to deal with, and the benefits that you get from this province economically are very damn freaking significant from that port. I mean, there's also Bordello, so I focused on that, but yeah, let's just say that going after Marienburg is perfectly sensical. I mean, the province itself is annoying to defend because of how it's designed, but you can deal with the Norscan attackers. And yes, the Empire is actually a much better area, or has much better provinces than the freaking Bretonnia. Maybe the strategy in a Lewin campaign is ignore Musalon, ignore everything that's happening in Bretonnia, and just focus on conquering Marienburg as quickly as possible. I'm not joking. Maybe that is the strategy, conquer Bretonnia, then conquering Midland, you know, taking all of that stuff for yourself, building a new shiny empire. Maybe that is the real strategy in a campaign like this. But yeah, you then have the research tree. Holy shit, does this suck. First off, Confederation of Bretonnian factions, unless you're playing Rapunzel, requires you to research stuff that takes up to 35 turns if you're going to do it. Granted, you know, it depends on which faction you're looking to confederate, but the problem is a lot of these factions over here are minor factions that are going to be wiped out very quickly. And it's 7 freaking turns to get even one of them done. But realistically, to be quite honest, if you're playing, say, a campaign as Lewin, or actually any Bretonnian campaign, which faction do you think is going to work in terms of confederation? Because I can tell you, a lot of these factions are starting enemies for legendary lords. Like, you look at Aquitaine, that's Grom. Good luck with that, with saving that one. It's probably not going to happen. And even if you do save it, you're just going to get 1 settlement for 7 turns of research, or 10 turns of research. Like the faction that you can get are Lyonesse, Bastan, because Lyonesse starts over Musalon, so minor faction versus minor faction, you can save them. Bastan is minor faction at war with the dwarves, though I find that war doesn't necessarily prolong itself. Artois gets wiped out in 2 turns. Literally, you cannot even get this research before they get wiped out, so it's completely fucking pointless. Like, everything over here is just kind of, like, pointless in terms of research. And ultimately, all you get is, like, 10 peasants. Like, oh, you can confederate the legendary lords in a campaign, to be sure. Not that many of them are worth that much. Like, you tell me with a straight face that well, okay, Confederate Albrecht is actually worth it, I know, but the Fey Enchantress, no thank you. Really, no thank you. But then you shouldn't ignore the water pumps research. Because, see, your main limitation early on in a campaign is the peasant economy or the knights, or a combination of peasants and knights. Fey Enchantress doesn't work because even though she has more peasants, she doesn't have the knights. So that is an issue. Because like, yeah, you can have more shitty peasants. Great. Can I actually get a really good cav situation? No. That's not happening. But you do have water pumps. It gives each of your region can sustain 1 peasant unit. And everything else in terms of research is pointless. You end up researching the same damn thing over and over again. And nothing else is worth it whatsoever in this entire damn research tree. Honestly, like, virtually all, like, yeah, you got a couple of things that are useful, to be sure, but it's not great. The entire research tree is just complete garbage in a lot of different ways. I mean, okay, improved construction, probably should have gotten it by this point. I admit, 1 turn construction time for provincial capital settlement buildings. There's some good stuff there, but it just feels like incredibly limited, and a lot of the stuff here is fluff. A lot of the stuff on the right side, a lot of it is also fluff. So yeah, they need a better research tree. I mean, there's some good stuff, but it's like you have to go through so many piles of actual freaking garbage to get access to it. It is annoying, I gotta say, in a lot of different ways. So those are some of the issues of Bretonnia. Like, I would say probably one of the bigger ones is Bretonnia itself and the vows, and of course the lack of infantry. The problem with infantry in Bretonnia itself is that because of all the provincial capitals, you have a lot of sieges. And you know what's worse about that? See, many races can have settlements designed in an appropriate fashion for their race to actually play in. Like, you look at an empire settlement. Sure, there's plenty of sections of walls on an empire settlement or a walled city of the empire that don't have towers and that can be exploited. But when you look at an empire settlement, the layout of it, all that, it suits their playstyle. Like, you can use range units, you can use artillery, you can use cav. Yes, cav. You look at vampire counts, you look at X, Y, and Z. There are plenty of settlements designed in terms of layout that work for their race. There's also ones that aren't. Kislev is a major freaking example. Kislev has horrible siege layouts in quite a few settlements. But Bretonnia, I would say, has some of the worst, if not the worst, siege layout in their own cities. For their own army, to defend or attack. Like, that's one of the reasons you may want to go after Empire, because it's actually going to be a much better time. Like, you're going to use cavalry in an Empire siege, in an Empire settlement siege. Good luck doing that in a Bretonian siege. So, yeah, Bretonnia itself is one of the major problems. If you're wondering why I didn't do the quest battle, it's like, honestly, I just didn't get the breathing space. And I had plenty of ways of getting money. Which, by the way, brings me to a really stupid point about Bretonnia. See, you have limitations on, like, post-battle loot, which is not great. You can either kill or, ransom guys. Again, it's just not great. But here's the problem with that. There are a bunch of negative traits you can get as Bretonnia, but here's the kicker. There's one trait that's quote-unquote a negative trait that really is a genuinely fucking positive one. Because remember, you have a lot of economic limitations and a lot of issues early on. Well, you can get the trait if you sack settlements that increases your income from sacking settlements by 50%. Which means that while you won't match the Greenskins in a long campaign, because obviously Greenskins get all those buildings, you will surpass the vast majority of races in the game. And this trait is very easy to max out. Oh, you're paying 20 chivalry per turn. That is completely fucking irrelevant as far as I see it in a campaign perspective. Like, chivalry is like, oh, you can call upon the Green Knights and all lords. Like, once you get to 4,000 chivalry, you can call upon you can recruit new lords with Knight's Vow. And mind you, it goes all the way to the questing vow, not the Grail vow. And by the time you get to 8,000, it's like, GG, well played. This is pointless. This entire thing is just like kind of, you know, complete pointless. Yes, it helps your leadership, but the requirements over here are too significant. Takes too long to actually get them. And the benefits, like, you can get a bunch of benefits to make the shitty infantry work as Bretonnia. But the problem is it's so long term that it doesn't matter in the portion of the campaign which you're actually playing. That's all I had to say. Christine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.